Happy Easter!
Happy Easter!
Good to be here via a screen with you guys. Of all the days in the Christian faith, this day represents the moment, the pinnacle of our faith, when an entire group of people went from unbelief and doubt to life-changing belief. The Eastern Orthodox Church says, "He is risen," and then people shout back,
"He is risen indeed."
I don't know why we all know that, because we're not technically Eastern Orthodox, but he is risen.
He is risen indeed.
We didn't plan that. Thank you. This Easter weekend, you guys, for me, I know for many of you, is bittersweet. Yesterday, one of our own dearly loved, Paul Owens, passed away hours after recording something for us that we're going to show at the end of the message today. It's bittersweet for me because the pain that he was in, we know he's no longer in. The way that he was held back by his age, he's no longer held back in those ways. It's bittersweet for me because Paul was one of the strongest people of prayer that I've known, but he also had a tremendous amount of doubt. Paul didn't have any doubt anymore. He leaves that now for us to carry. It's bittersweet because Paul was somebody that always wanted more and more and more of Jesus, and he's got all he can handle right now. Bittersweet, I spoke with him 3 or 4 times this week, and now, yesterday I found myself just wanting one more conversation, one more phone call. Now it doesn't feel like enough. For me, it's bittersweet because he had a ministry working at a care facility with some older people, and because coronavirus, he won't be able to go say goodbye. Nobody at our church can ever take his place, as you know. I was making calls yesterday, and it was so hard, so many emotions, but I was calling and just telling people that we lost Paul. And one sweet lady from our church just burst into prayer. An older lady just began to pray with power and authority. And I'd never heard that from her before, and I just thought, oh my goodness, this is so honoring of Paul. Lindsay's actually just here for a minute. She's going to read a letter that we got from somebody regarding Paul. So, Lindsay, I'll turn it over for you.
So this is a lady at our church who hasn't known Paul for as long as some of you have, but she sent this to Eli, and I feel like it sums up what I think what we all felt about Paul. It says, "Dear family of Paul, my heart goes out to you all. I'm at loss for words to ease the pain you must be going through right now. In the 3 short years that I have known Paul, he has helped me strengthen my faith in the Lord. He was my deacon. If I didn't approach him at first, he would literally hunt me down until he spoke to me. LOL. Never once since I've known him, when he sees me, has he failed to ask, 'What can I pray for you for?' He never asked, 'Do you need prayer?' It was always, 'What do I need to pray about for you, Debbie?' I always had to tell him because he was going to pray for me, whether I told him or not. He never failed to tell me that he prayed in the Spirit. I knew he did because I could feel him praying for me. But my most favorite thing about Paul was his hugs. They were the best. Since Cornerstone's doors have closed these past few weeks, Paul has called me every Saturday without fail. I'm truly going to miss my friend. I'll be praying that somehow you can find peace and comfort and knowing that he is in the most glorious place now with his Lord. God be with you all."
Thank you, Lindsay, for reading that. She's going to tune in with our kids downstairs. So yeah, if you're with me and like me, it's bittersweet. There's some hard things about today. Paul loved Easter, and he'll be celebrating it in a different way than any of us today. But man, it's just hard. It's also I've been excited about this particular service because we're going to have a bigger audience than we've ever had. So people in the far reaches of our influence will be tuning in and listening. And at the same time this morning, I just have this desire to speak intimately with our church. We're a small church. We're a small church family. And it's moments like yesterday when I was making those phone calls and letting people know that Paul had passed on, moments like that I realized, man, there's a power and a beauty and an intimacy in a small church. As people answered the phone and just cried, and prayed and responded all different ways, but always like family. Bittersweet is one of the words that just captures this particular Easter Sunday for me. Tom has put together a video compilation of many of our people either doing worship or reading something. I already mentioned this, but he caught Paul, hours before he died. We have a prayer from Paul on this video. So we're going to display a link to that at the end of the service today. It's about an hour long, so you can watch it together or just, at your pleasure throughout the day. Powerful and fun and very homemade, just seeing our family come together and say, hey, this is meaningful to me on Easter. So I had actually a plan I was going to do with these fun, cute little chairs. This message is one that I didn't invent it or make it up, but to me it's a great way of sharing the gospel. I'm not going to do that this morning. I'm going to do that later. So be watching for this video. You'll recognize it because I'll be holding up these cute little chairs. Be watching for that. Because the reason I'm producing that is to really share with people the heart of God. And I'm just so hopeful that people can have a picture of God that they're drawn to, that they're excited about, that they say, no matter what, I have to know God, if God's like that. So be watching for that. The point of that is that you can watch it and then tune in with a friend or do a watch party. Just somehow share the heart of God. Today, I just want to share the simple message. I'm going to turn to John 20 here after a bit. The simple message that a man died and rose from the dead. We have lots of evidence that years ago God walked among us, that somehow God, the theological word is incarnated, became one of us. And when he did that, he showed us a whole new way of being human. We have record after record of him dying at our hands in our place. But the wildest part of all is this rumor that a man overcame death and rose again. A man rose again. I call it a rumor because I think it's almost the best thing to call it. I call it a rumor because people didn't believe it at first. In fact, no one believed it. There wasn't one person that we have witness of in all these writings. There was not one person walking around going, Jesus did say he was going to die and come back again. Didn't he say something about 3 days? So that's why the Bible's hilarious to me, because you have all these accounts of these people recording his words saying, I'll be back. And yet his closest friends, the ones that wrote these books in the New Testament that we call the Gospels, his closest friends, not one of them believed he was coming back. Not one of them. It's kind of embarrassing, really, because, you've taught people, you've had people where you're like, all right, I know I've showed you how to do that. Jesus poured into these guys. Jesus taught these guys for years. And yet not one of his friends believed. So look, man, if you have doubts, if you have disbelief, you're in good company. And just for the record, I don't know if everybody knew this about Paul. Some people might be embarrassed to learn this, but I was proud of this. Paul would call me with the greatest levels of disbelief. Here's somebody who had the deepest faith in Jesus, and at the same time, he often would fall into these places of disbelief. And I thought over and over, Paul, you're in good company. If Jesus couldn't get these guys he walked around with and did miracles with and blessed and lived with to believe. So even women in the Bible, in the Gospels especially, well before their time, I shouldn't say even women especially were often portrayed at having a different level of faith. But even the women went to his tomb early on Easter morning. And they didn't go hoping for a miracle. They didn't go looking for the risen Lord. Oh, no, man. They went to cry, to mourn, to hurt, to remember, to keep his memory alive the same way we're going to be celebrating our dear friend Paul, to keep his memory alive. So bittersweet, but mostly bitter. They were full of doubt and hurt and betrayal. It was so I mean, the writers of the Gospels, they're so convinced of these emotional responses and what people are going through that they write this story, and in it, these women see a man and they think he's the gardener. That's what they thought. That's what they believed, because they thought that their story had ended. They thought that this journey they'd been on was over. So, man, if you've had doubts, if you've had disbelief, you're in good company. Because even his closest friends didn't believe. Even his family didn't believe. And then they did, boy. And then they did. One of the strongest reasons we have for believing that a dead man came back to life days later is me, is you watching through this screen. It's us. It's this movement, this group of people that we've come to call the church. Because this was an ordinary group of people who believed that the story was over. They didn't have any hope that anything could change. But we gather around screens today, the largest gathering of people in the world hearing messages like this. We gather because that small group of people jumped from unbelief to belief. And the church that lives across the planet, that covers the globe, lives because those first people saw Jesus, who was dead, walking around, being alive. There's nothing else like this. So guys, I want to turn to John 20 and just share a little bit of this story. I'll probably jump around a little bit, but let me get here and share a little bit of this story in John 20. It starts like this. Early on in the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed. So she came running to Simon Peter. By the way, I'll just include this part because it's so funny. I know everybody wants to talk about this. It's just good stuff, man. The whole book's funny. Like, seriously, if you miss the humor in this book, you're missing a good portion of it. So she comes running to Simon Peter, verse 2, and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They've taken the Lord out of the tomb. We don't know where they put him." So after all this, none of them are like, "He's risen." He's risen indeed. The Eastern Orthodox Church, by the way, do think that Mary is the one that started that. So she comes running, and running's a theme for John. This other disciple, the one Jesus loved, that's John himself. So verse 3, so Peter and the other disciple, that's John, started for the tomb. Both were running. By the way, John wrote last. He wrote his gospel last. He has these other gospels in front of him, and he's like, dude, I'm going to set the story straight. Both were running, but the other disciple, that's John, outran Peter and reached the tomb first. John, the gospel writer, feels like this is a really important detail. John knows Peter's going to read this document, and John's like, come on, Peter. Come on, you remember how this went. The other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and he looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but he didn't go in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him. Wait, John, where was Simon? Behind the other disciple, behind John. Where was Simon Peter? Behind him. And he went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple, that's John. Which one? That's John. The other disciple who had reached the tomb first. I'm telling you, man. Like, he really wanted us to catch this little bit of detail. The other disciple, that's John. They were both running, John and Peter. The other one got there first. He saw and believed. So this is kind of the first instance of belief. This guy that went from doubt got into the tomb, and all of a sudden something began to change. And then John tells us they still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to where they were staying. This is so important for John because you're going to see, I think just a little bit even today, you're going to see Jesus shows up to groups of people almost every time. Jesus loves a gathering. We're gathered, and wherever his people are gathered, man, he's there. And John tells us that over and over. Verse 11, now Mary stood outside the tomb crying, and as she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. Now, John's sneaking in some symbolism here. So for you Bible nerds, I'm not going to give you the answer. Yeah, there's like 4 of you in my circle. Does this passage remind you of anything? What could John be saying here with these two angels, one at the head and one at the foot? Moving on. They asked her, these angels, woman, why are you crying? They've taken my Lord away, she said, and I don't know where they've put him. At this, she turned around and she saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize it was Jesus. And so he asked her, woman, why are you crying? Who is it that you're looking for? Thinking he was the gardener, here it is. Thinking he was the gardener, she said, sir, if you carried him away, tell me where have you put him, and I will get him. And then verse 16 is one of the most beautiful passages, I think, in the entire Bible. Verse 16 says, Jesus said to her, Mary. 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 So this God that Christians believe became fully human, the divine wrapped up in skin and wearing teeth and fingernails and long curly hair, the divine incarnated, the infinite became finite and lived an actual life, dies, comes back. Nobody's ready for him to do that. Nobody's expecting that. And then he looks this woman in the eye and he speaks her name. Out of all the universe and the cosmos, Mary. So beautiful. The Bible tells us she then turned to him and cried out in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. And then verse 17 actually suffers from a bad translation that happened in 1611 with the King James Version. Verse 17 says, Jesus said, do not hold me. But if you look at the Greek, what he's actually saying is, you have to let go of me now. So Bible scholars think she just ran to him. There was nothing between her and him. She ran and just threw herself on him because she knew man. We're talking about this. You've been there where you go from doubt, from absolute doubt to all of a sudden you're all in. So she throws herself on Jesus when he speaks her name. And then Jesus in verse 17 says, you have to let go of me. I don't know how your Bible will translate it. We just translated the verb wrong a long time ago, and when the King James was written. So because of that, some bad theology arose that said that Mary wasn't even allowed to touch him, that she had to stay at a distance. But that's not what the original Greek says at all. You have to let go of me. Do not hold on to me. And do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Listen to this. Don't miss this part. Go instead. So Mary, you've got to let go of me for now. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. In other words, all these things I've promised it, they're happening right now. So it's so fascinating to me. He says, Mary, you can't hold on to me any longer. Why? Because I actually have something I need you to do for me now. I have a mission, I have a purpose, a job, a calling, whatever you call it. And so he says, go where my people are gathered and tell them about me. And then verse 18, Mary, she gets up and goes. What else is she going to do? Verse 18 says, Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, I have seen the Lord. And she told them that he had said these things to her. So there's a couple stages to this thing. There's first disbelief and doubt, and everybody seems to be experiencing that and feeling that. And then he calls her voice. He calls her by name, and something happens. With that personal recognition and acknowledgement, she recognizes who he is, and she has to respond. She throws herself at Jesus. There's this connection, this brief union. I mean, the briefest. You know. Like I was saying with Paul, man, like what I wouldn't give for one more phone call. One more phone call. She has the briefest connection with a guy that she thought was gone out of her life forever. And then out of that, almost instantly, he gives her a mission. And he just says, go tell your friends. Go gather and tell your friends. The next appearing of Jesus happens. John records it here just in a few verses later. The next appearing is when the people, his friends, his family, are gathered together in a room. In that gathering, one of them is missing. You maybe know his name as Doubting Thomas. It's a cute nickname. I don't know why we've nicknamed him Doubting Thomas, because they were all doubting. It was doubting Mary and doubting Peter and doubting Eli and doubting Paul and doubting everybody basically. But Doubting Thomas wasn't there. I find it so fascinating. Doubting Thomas, the only one that wasn't in the room, had to wait an entire week to meet Jesus again. And you know when Jesus showed up again? So interesting to me, man. You know when he showed up again? The next time his people gathered in a room on Sunday. Here we are gathered together. So I want to repeat a couple of these things. There's something in doubt that's holy. You don't have to be afraid of it. There's something in a desire to hear his voice, what I would call an earnest or an honest search for the divine. I believe if you search for God, you'll find him. I've always believed that. I've seen that all over in my life and lives of others. There's something in the connection you have with God when you know that you've been with God. And then there's something in the mission and the calling. And when people go through these stages, these encounters with God, one of the ways that you know is they begin to share with friends. They begin to tell people what they've experienced, what they've received. Because there's really, really something in the gathering. I mean, really, that's where God shows up so often. That's where this movement was born, in the gathering of the real lives of real people. Because if a man had died and come back to life, if that had really happened, then all of a sudden his words and his life took on new life on their own. Happy Easter. Like, if this thing was real, their lives would have to be adjusted to reflect that. Happy Easter. For the first time ever, all of his friends got it. For the first time ever, they all went from unbelief to belief together. And we know because they started the movement that we are carrying on right here. We know because the church now meets everywhere around the world. We know because they died for their conviction that Jesus was God in the flesh and all those things that he said. Like, I've come so that you would have life and life to the fullest. Whoever believes in me will have everlasting life. I and the Father are one. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. All these things he said. You will be with me from forever. I didn't come to condemn the world, but to save the world. All these things he said all of a sudden took on their own new life. But his core belief, if you're part of my church, you've heard this message a lot. It deserves a lot because this was Jesus's core belief. A couple of years ago, I began to ask, what did Jesus really believe? Like, what did he believe about himself, about God, about the world, about this whole thing that we're all tangled up in together? What did he really believe? Well, we know because people asked him. They said, hey, Jesus, what do you really believe? He was asked these words directly, and when he quoted from the Old Testament, 2 books put together, Deuteronomy and Leviticus. And I always boil that down. He believed, love God, love people. It was written a long time before his time. But he stepped into that and he said, that's what I believe. That's what's most important. That's the fulfillment of all the law, of all the scriptures. That's the whole point. Love God, love people. If it doesn't pass that test, it doesn't pass any test. Jesus, what did you believe? Jesus, dude that came back from the dead, what did you believe? I believed, love God, love people. But there's something more, too. He was actually saying a lot more, something a lot bigger than that. Something the church would do well to listen to today. Rabbi, teacher, Jesus, what did you believe? What's your thing? What's the most important? Love God, that's the most important. Love people. Okay, but how do you do that? Well, here's how you don't do it. Not by doing a lot of religious things, whether it's attending this or that, giving this or that, volunteering for this or that. Not by sacrifice, not by offerings. You love God by loving people. I'm not going to take you to all the passages where he displays that today, but just very simply, you love God by loving people. What did Jesus believe? Love God, love people. And even bigger than that, you love God by loving people. God and people, in his opinion, were intertwined. They were fused. They were connected together. They were intimately bound. Their stories crossed. You see this in the person of Jesus, and they would never uncross again. Loving God, the action of which is shown best and is really done in loving people. So Jesus, of course, lived this out perfectly. That's the thing that has inspired loyalty from so many. He continues to live this out. People like Paul, like my friend Paul, who passed away 2 days ago, Paul lived this out so well. This practice of loving God, of honoring God, of worshiping God by loving and serving the people that God loves so deeply, that God cares about so deeply. You know, he did this every time he taught his followers to turn the other cheek, to give, to sacrifice, to surrender our own rights, to lay down our lives, not to judge, not to slander, not to condemn, to forgive, to serve, to love, to lift up and not tear down, to encourage and not dishearten. Happy Easter, church. Love God, love people. How do we do that? By loving people. Oh, so don't be scared of your doubts, and please, please, please tune in and listen for his voice calling your name, because he wants to have a personal experience with you the same way he did with Mary in the garden. He wants to look at you and call your name. Hey, Mary, Mary. And when he does, man, I pray that you would recognize that voice. Because there's a doubting that's holy, but there's also a doubting that is not godly. When you've seen, when you've heard, when you've entered in, and you're just like, no. So I pray that you would hear that voice when he calls your name. And then gather with people. That's where you see him best. That's where you experience him the most clearly. Find someone to love. Find a people to gather with. Live out this story that everybody thought was coming to an end, but then continued in a more powerful way than anybody could have ever imagined. Happy Easter. So again, I had a different plan today. I was going to do a demonstration of the heart of God. I started changing that last night. God started doing something else in me. I will still do that. It'll be a video, and I would encourage you to use that video to watch with friends and to just help people understand the heart of God, because in it, I want to clear up some misconceptions, some bad understandings, I think bad ideas about who God is, and really shine a light on the best revelation we have of God, and that is the person of Jesus. So I'll try to get that video out about 6 o'clock tonight if you want to tune in there. There'll be an opportunity, like seriously, a real opportunity to share with friends. Watch it first maybe. Make sure you agree with it. Even if you don't, watch it, share with friends, have a conversation. Let's do that together. And then church, happy Easter. So good to, I'm staring at a screen, but I feel like I'm staring into your eyes, and I just pray that this story would grow and come to life in your life, and that just like the people who experienced it firsthand, that you wouldn't be able to do anything else once you've realized who he is and what he's done. That your response would be just like theirs, that you'd throw yourself on him, that you'd throw yourself to God. And then that you'd start sharing the story, and you'd start gathering with people, even not understanding what in the world is going on, only understanding that I've had an experience with the divine, and I'm going after this. Hey, I see on our live page there, Lindsay just shared the link to our YouTube video. Man, these videos are so special because these are our people of our small church. Just some of them reading from their heart, others of them playing songs. Paul reading a prayer. Literally Friday night, Paul reading a prayer. none of us knowing that by Saturday, we wouldn't have him to pray for us live anymore by the time Easter Sunday came. So special. So I'd encourage you guys just to tune in. I'll keep you guys updated on what we're going to do to honor Paul too. I will be working with Jet and just kind of moving in that direction as well. Love you guys. Happy Easter. So good.